Hi guys, welcome to the channel. My name is Chris Wright. I'm a landscape photographer working out of Granada. Now this week I tried my hand at street photography and I came up with a whole host of really interesting things which I'm going to tell you about. Out of 100 photographs that I took on the day, I got 2 keepers, which I think was quite an achievement. I actually like these pictures quite a lot. The rest of them not so much, but that's what you get. Now, the point is, what I want to talk about is the thing of transitioning from an area that I know a lot about, i.e. landscape photography, where I feel perfectly well qualified to comment, into an area that I know much less about, where I don't feel particularly qualified to comment. But I think there's something about the experience of making that change that is interesting. Now, I want to talk about 2 things. One is the way that we learn, and the other is the Dunning-Kruger effect. 3 things. The third thing I want to talk about is where street photography exists in the totality of all photography, because there's an interesting phenomena going on here, which I think is part of what makes photography so fascinating and so rich. I think I've never come across an amateur dentist or an amateur accountant, thank God. But amateur photographers and enthusiasts contribute probably well over 80% of what the really good work is in photography. The stuff that we go and see in museums is not generally done by professional photographers. Now, there are exceptions to this. And one exception, I would say, is Saul Leiter. Have I pronounced his name correctly? I hope so. No doubt somebody will correct me in the comments if I haven't, but he was a professional photographer, worked in magazines and so on, but the photography for which he is most famous is his street photography and the early colour work in particular. He was an absolute pioneer, and I have several books of his, and I often look at them. And I've found this with a lot of the pioneers of photography whose books I've collected avidly, is I have learned a great deal. These people are absolutely inspirational. And part of learning is to take on board what you can see in these pictures and try to analyze what makes them so good, what makes them so exceptional. And it's hard. I've been doing photography since the early 1980s, around about 1980, which I think by my rudimentary maths, definitely an amateur mathematician, but it's something in the region of 45 years, and I still haven't got to the bottom of it. So that says something about learning. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that the value of a photograph has got nothing to do with how much you get paid for making it. And I think this was perhaps a trap that I and several professional photographers fall into, is thinking that because we get paid to do this photography, the work we're producing is somehow better than other people's work. I think that's complete nonsense. I've actually come across many photographers who I think are more highly skilled than I am. It's just possibly the fact that I was able to market myself better or more effectively, or the fact that they may not have wanted to be a professional photographer at all. God knows it's a pretty thankless task. So there's that. But I wanted to really acknowledge the contribution that enthusiast photographers make to the whole art of photography, and I think it's immense and inspirational. So the next thing that I wanted to get to, actually, let's first of all talk about the day of photography. Now, the day of photography was informed very much by a drink I had with a very close friend in Brighton. When I was in the UK over Christmas, I went out with for a drink with a friend of mine called Jerry Webb, who's a very, very good photographer. He's somebody who I have an immense amount of respect for, and somebody who I'm delighted to say has agreed to come and host a workshop for me in Granada later on this year. If you're interested in finding out more about street photography in Granada workshop, subscribe to the mailing list, the link's down below, and you'll be the first to hear more about this when it gets firmed up. But I'm delighted that Jerry's agreed to come and do that with me. It's going to be excellent. But anyway, we were in a pub talking about photography, and I, as I often do, said that I don't consider myself to be a natural street photographer or a natural people photographer. It's something that I've always struggled with. My observation was that to mitigate against this, the methods that I use to do street photography consists of finding a place that I think has got potential and constructing a frame that I think will be completed by somebody walking into the frame. And whether that be by dint of the fact that they're doing something extraordinary, or whether it's by dint of the fact that they're wearing clothes that match a predominant colour in the scene, or some other coincidental juxtaposition, is kind of immaterial. And Jerry said, yes, that's absolutely right. I can see how that works. And he said, the thing is with street photography is you always need that element of somebody doing something exceptional. And at that point my head exploded, because it has taken me this long to get to the point of acknowledging that somebody walking into the frame at all makes the picture better. So there's that. But the point I'm trying to get to is that I took this idea into this day of street photography. And what happened was this: I got in there, and it was a really beautiful day with this low winter sun raking across the streets. And my first attempts, of which this is an example, I think were totally unexceptional. I was trying to make use of the sunshine. I was trying to get, by photographing into the sun, trying to get some decent silhouettes going. Wasn't really succeeding very much, and I wasn't really connecting, I felt, with or saying anything about the city. It was purely street photography by numbers. And consequently the pictures were no good. And I found it was only later in the day that I started to actually work properly with the light and started to take photographs that were more interesting. Now, this is one of the ones that I felt was a keeper. This is the yellow house with the family, three elements walking down the slope in front of the house. And it was just perfect because of the angle of the light. So the light is raking across the front of the house, is producing this very stark contrast of darks and lights, and happily I managed to get the frame exactly as the people were intersecting the border between the dark and the light, and it worked terrifically well. And I was really, really pleased with this picture. I think this really works well for me, and I felt more delighted because it wasn't simply trying to reconstruct one of my heroes' photographs. So I think this is a photograph that I'm happy to take credit for. The other photograph is more interesting because the other photograph exemplifies the Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, Dunning-Kruger was a paper, it was an observation by two psychologists who put forward the theory that when we are learning something, we don't know what it is that we don't know. So there's a stage right at the beginning. So when we pick up our first camera, mastering the controls of that camera is the mountain. You know, never mind the rest of it. I mean, if we can get it in focus, that's a bonus. We're an expert. And joking aside, we see a great deal of this in photography on forums and on groups on Facebook and so on and so forth. There are people expounding with total confidence on subjects for which they are uniquely unqualified to comment because they don't know the totality of the knowledge around this subject. Now, I'm not saying this is everybody, but there is a definite coincidence of this around photography. We see it a great deal on photography forums. And I'm sure I have commented in the past about things which I'm probably not qualified to comment about. I've certainly made mistakes. And in fact, fact-checking is a big part of what I do with these videos. There is a completely invisible slice of work that involves fact-checking at every stage to make sure that I've actually got it right. So the thing about Dunning-Kruger is that it manifestly prevents us from progressing because, unlike climbing a mountain where there's something similar that goes on when the peak that you see when you start the climb is not the peak of the mountain, it's simply the first ridge. And what you find is that you go on and on and on. You get to the first one, you look and there's another one that's just as steep and just as forbidding beyond, and you climb that one, there's another one beyond that. So that can be a dispiriting experience, but the thing that's unique about more nebulous things like photography is that you can't see the peaks behind. So you get to the first thing and the initial impulse is, I've cracked it. And, you know, were it not for your urge to be more curious and to look deeper and to look further, and so on, and to delve into the wealth of imagination that's available, a wealth of information that's available on YouTube and so on, you would probably remain at that point forever. And indeed, there are people that do remain at that point forever, and they very seldom produce work that's worth looking at. So where I fell foul of Dunning-Kruger is, the effect is, and the big realization for me is that Dunning-Kruger is not just for beginners, it's for seasoned photographers as well. There is always something new to learn and there is always more that you can do. And I think for me it was about seeing this initial frame, which is here, and thinking, wow, that's done it, I've cracked it, that's the photograph. And completely ignoring the fact there's a massive amount of dead space on the left and the fact that it's balanced by not so dead space on the right doesn't improve the picture. And so it took me literally a couple of days to go, I wonder if I can improve on this picture. And to start playing around with the crop of it. And I found, in fact, that I did this in two stages. I got to this picture, and I thought this was an improvement, but not still as good as it could be. And so I continued playing around with it, and this was the picture that I got to in the end. Now, I think that this end point is much better than the first one. And the thing that I'm trying to point out here is that the first one was the one that gave me the made it moment. that was the picture that I thought I'd cracked it. And in fact it wasn't. It was the third picture that did it for me. Now, you might subjectively disagree with me about whether one picture is better and my reasoning for moving through the cycle, but the point I'm trying to make is that when you're trying a new skill, when you're trying a new genre, don't fall for the rush that when you look at the back of your camera and go, fantastic, I've got the light here. That's not the end of the story. It very seldom is. There is always stuff that you can do to improve, and whether that's taking a completely different frame or whether it's embellishing the frame that you've got is another story. Now, so that's two things, and I feel both of those things are quite important in photography. And I'm 68, I'm 69 in a couple of months, and I've been doing photography for 45 years now, and I'm delighted to be able to say with a straight face that I am not an expert. I do not believe that I've done it all. There are some areas of photography that I'm much better at than others. There are some areas of photography that I won't touch with a 10-foot pole. But my point is, and this is what's so beautiful about photography, is there is always more to learn, and I think it's fantastic that I can sit here at the age of 68 and have so much in front of me that I can still struggle away at. And with that thought, I'll leave you. Thanks for sticking with us for so long. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Do go down and subscribe to the mailing list if you're not already, and you'll be the first person to know about the workshops later this year. And if you've enjoyed the video, give us a like or subscribe to the channel. That would be equally fantastic. And we'll see you next week with a different video. Thanks a lot, guys. Bye now.